All right, today we're jumping into something really interesting. We're going to unpack the worldview presented in a document called the Global Sovereign's Handbook by Johnny Liberty. Now, this thing offers a pretty radical take on citizenship, government, and global power, a perspective that, really challenges how a lot of us see the world. So let's get right into it.
This right here, this is the core idea the whole book is built on. It kicks off with this really powerful claim that our whole understanding of what it means to be an American citizen is a gross deception. The author argues this deception has been built up for generations, starting way back after the Civil War through government lies and propaganda.
So, how does the book even begin to make a case like that? Well, it doesn't just lay out facts. It kind of frames the whole thing as an investigation. The author presents all this information like he's putting together what he calls a gigantic jigsaw puzzle. And what does this puzzle supposedly show when you put all the pieces together? According to the handbook, it's a secret war. We're not talking about a conventional war with armies and battlefields. No, this is a war for control over our minds and our property. And it's being waged against everyone, all over the world.
This leads us right to the heart of the problem, at least as the handbook sees it, a plan for total global control. The book gets into who it thinks is behind this plan and what their final goal really is.
The book gives this goal a name you've probably heard before, the New World Order, but its definition is really specific. It's described as a global dictatorship that's a weird mix of fascism, communism, and capitalism. And this, it says, is the end game for a hidden power structure. And, it doesn't just stop at some vague power structure. Nope, it points fingers at specific, real-world organizations. It says these groups are the major players working behind the scenes, all pushing towards this one-world government. And to really drive the point home, the handbook pulls out quotes from big names, like this one from former U.S. Senator Barry Goldwater. The argument being made is that these groups aren't just innocent think tanks. They're seen as tools designed specifically to grab political power for international banks and corporations. Okay, so if that's the what and the who, the big question is how, right? How could something like this actually be pulled off? The book's answer is pretty simple: through massive, widespread deception and fraud. One of the main tools it claims is what it calls mind control. Now, we're not talking about sci-fi gadgets here. It's way more subtle than that. We're talking about things like rigid dogmas, social peer pressure, and media propaganda, all designed to stop us from thinking for ourselves. And this idea of a grand deception, it goes way deeper. The book argues that some of the most basic parts of our society, the government we see, the income tax system, even the political leaders on TV, are not what they seem. It actually calls them all components of a monumental fraud. Now, this is probably the most important distinction in the entire handbook. It puts forward this idea that there are actually two different kinds of citizenship. On one side, you've got the sovereign, state citizen who has natural, unalienable rights, but on the other side is the U.S. citizen, which the book claims is a creation of the 14th Amendment. It argues this second type of citizen is more like a subject, holding only privileges, because they've unknowingly traded their rights away through contracts. So after painting this pretty grim picture, the handbook finally gets to its solution. And it's not what you might expect, like traditional political protests. It's actually all about an individual journey to reclaim what's been lost. Let's take a look at how that's supposed to work. The whole path to freedom, according to this source, it starts inside your own head. It's about, in their words, breaking the chains of denial. The very first step is just an individual deciding to take personal responsibility for their own freedom, mentally and emotionally. And here's the actual roadmap the handbook lays out. You can see it's a step-by-step process. It all starts with deprogramming your own mind from social conditioning. From there, you're supposed to educate yourself, start thinking critically, and then it culminates in these declarations. First an internal one for your own spirit, and then a formal external one to reclaim your political and legal status. But it doesn't just end with a personal solution. The handbook wraps up with a huge call to action for its readers, and it lays out a vision for a totally different kind of future. The vision here is nothing short of a total transformation. The book talks about needing that same kind of courage that started the country in the first place, but using it for a new kind of restoration. It promises a future that's more inclusive, a future where everybody wins. So what's the call to action? It's basically a grassroots movement built on self-education and taking direct action. The handbook is really pushing its readers to actively reclaim control over the core institutions of society. all to restore what it calls the constitutional republic. But here's the interesting part. The main strategy isn't about fighting the system head-on. Not at all. It's actually about mass noncompliance. The whole idea is to just withdraw your support from the current system, start building alternatives, and in doing so, you make the old system obsolete. And that brings us to the very end. The handbook basically leaves its readers with this really intense final choice. It frames the whole thing as this ultimate challenge: live free as a sovereign or die as a slave to what it calls the global manipulators. And then it puts it all on you, saying, the choice is yours.